everybody. Thanks for joining us. Seafood Matters. Today, I'm joined by Jason and Kirstyn Munro, founders of Ecomotus, based in Newton Abbot at Devon. Over 15 years of research and development has led them to produce the EcoPro catalytic hydrogen electrolyzer, a retrofit system now installed on more than 30 marine engines across the UK fleet. It carries RENA type approval and has been accepted by the Maritime and Coast Agency, MCA. Not small milestones in the marine world. Their work has been supported through a Transport Research and Innovation grant from the Department of Transport, delivered with Connected Places Catapult, and recognised by Seafish as a pioneering technology for fishing. Jason brings deep engineering experience from the fleet air arm through two diesel fuel systems across maritime and transport sectors. Kirstyn leads the commercial and regulatory side, securing funding pathways and ensuring fishermen can realistically access the technology. Today, we're going to look at what this system actually does and what it means for working fishing vessels right now. Let's begin. Hi, Jason and Kirstyn. Welcome to Seafood Matters.
Hi, Jim.
Lovely
hello,
to
everybody.
chat.
Thank you. Jason, tell our listeners, where did your fascination and experience start with hydrogen?
Oh gosh, quite a few years ago, I started off in my dad's garage in Cardiff, and then I joined the Navy as an aircraft engineer. Then we had a solar company, so always been into green stuff. And I broke my neck while I was in the Navy, and I had to take some time out. Couldn't pursue the solar business, but always had an interest in the hydrogen. So we picked up a kit off eBay, a HHO kit, tried it, played with it, adjusted it, modified it, then realised that with a modern engine, we had to emit the oxygen, so we allow that to go to atmosphere and only use the hydrogen to in the engine itself, which gave us a far greater window for improvements. And then, of course, going from an explosive gas to a flammable gas, it made it accessible, so could be used in the marine industry. So a safer approach to the old HHO system.
Were you seeing that as you were working on it and developing it?
Yes, absolutely. It was a question of having a moment where we could realise that we could push HHO as far as we could, but it had its limitations. And
You had one of those light bulb moments, Jim, where he sort of, if you don't mind me jumping in, one of those light bulb moments, literally, we sort of see the cartoon drawing, and he was just sitting there one day, sort of surrounded by the usual paraphernalia that inventors seem to have, and suddenly said, I've got it. I know how to do it. And so it sort of evolved from there. So that was a starting point.
Fantastic. And you developed this system from first principles over more than a decade. What was the hardest technical barriers to overcome, Jason?
Technical barriers weren't really an issue. The biggest problem we had was getting the correct fuel data from fishermen, because obviously we were fishermen were underreporting by about 20% on what we were doing, and so we've got to balance the exact amount of hydrogen that we install to treat the fuel, and if we're not coming close to it, people won't see the results. So it takes a fair bit of time. Now we've moved on to using modern electronics with reading the CAN bus data from engines or actual fuel flow meter settings. We sort of negate the need for fisherman's input. So if it's a modern CAN bus engine, it's easy to bolt on our system. Then our computer will work out how much hydrogen to put in to exactly to reduce the amount of NOxes, carbon dioxide, and obviously diesel particulates. And in doing that, we're increasing the power of the power output from the fuel by about 20%, which in which case you back off the throttle to the same speed and save money on fuel.
I was just going to jump in briefly, Jim, if I may do. I was just sort of to add to that. Jason was saying about the difficulties that we had in the early days, and he said what we discovered, or what we hadn't realised, is that fishermen really tend to not have any idea of how much fuel they're actually consuming. So we'd sort of found that on average, owners were burning around 20% more than they actually thought they were burning. So that sort of resulted in a lot of toing and froing, and in the early days adding extra electrolyzers to compensate for the fact that we were expecting to be treating a lot less fuel than they were actually consuming. So as Jason said, now because we've moved on to a CAN bus system for a lot of it, it reduces that problem, so it makes everything a lot easier and a lot less toing and froing and trying to resolve things long distance.
Okay. I thought they would have been quite straightforward, Jason, with if they were filling up a fuel the start of a trip and then filling up when they come back. They would know what they would know what they took on board.
Yeah, I think the problem is it's because we need to know how hard the engine's actually working. So if we're sort of taking an average, we're not allowing for the high end when it's under throttle. So if it goes up maybe by 20, 30, 40% above where the average is, then we're not treating that amount of hydrogen. We had a fixed point where we would allow an extra 20% above the average, but some of them were going a lot further than that. So by actually knowing the actual fuel being used at the time, it's a lot easier.
Yeah. You've taken this through RENA type approval and MCA acceptance. That's serious scrutiny. What did that process expose or challenge?
I think it showed us how serious we had to be about trying to get something of this nature actually to be sent to sea, go and do its job at sea, and come back and bring everybody back safely. So it was a question of making everything with the best materials we possibly could. We use titanium and platinum in our electrodes. A lot of people have gone on to carbon now, but we'll carry on with the more expensive materials because they last longer. You know, it's not about cheapness. It's about, well, it doesn't take long for me to munch away at people's profits if I've got to drive to Scotland to start changing out bits and pieces. So I think longevity is everything, and I think that's what RENA and the MCA have appreciated. That was our basic first principle. That's what we would do. So we had a 7-month assessment, really going through everything with RENA, working out from start to finish, and they gave us a lot of guidance along the way. So no, it's really good journey.
That's encouraging to think that they were almost a help to you, because that's not the way people find them quite often.
No, I think it's finding out a solution that is inexpensive and almost too simple to be true. So it's, if you think about burning you've got a product which only 70% of it's being used, and the other 30% turns to soot and heat. So by operating with the hydrogen, we're getting as close to 100% or 95% burning of the soot. So obviously that's going to transpire to be fuel savings. So if you were to operate a vessel exactly the same, sort of not pushing into hull speed and all the rest of it. So if you were going at the same speed with hydrogen or without hydrogen, you get about a 20% saving in fuel because you're burning the fuel properly, and that's really achievable. In average we sort of see about 8% across the fleets, but what people are doing, they're actually going that little bit faster or pulling that little bit harder. But if you were to dial it back to like for like, it would be about a 20% saving.
Can I just add a bit in there about the MCA? Do you mind?
Sure.
I was just going to say that we worked hand in hand with the MCA from the start and Marina, Jim, to make sure that we were trying to tick all the boxes, because obviously safety is paramount in the marine industry, which is why we moved across to working with the marine industry from starting with road and transport. And we worked really hard to make sure that we were ticking all the boxes and the MCA were happy, which was great, which is where we got to and why we started installing. We had a bit of a hiccup because the MCA, there was a change of departments. We then came under a new department with new ideas, and that gave us the 7 months where we were suddenly told by the MCA, you've got to stop installing, turn all the systems off while we actually assess you, because we don't believe that you've ticked all the boxes. We had to go back and redo all the processes again for the new team to reassure them and explain exactly how the EcoPro works and how inherently safe it is, and all the safety features have been put in there before we were able to, or before they'd allow us to turn the systems that were already out there back on again and carry on using them. So it was good from the point of view of, we know it's got to be safe and we understand exactly why they're doing it. But it did have a major impact on us as a company, because early owners that had been genuinely impressed in the first few weeks, kind of, and had seen the system and the benefits, they then had to stop using it for a while, and then when they turned it back on, they got so used to it after that time that the novelty had kind of worn off, so they didn't start sort of shouting from the rooftops about how excellent it was, because everyone had got slightly nervous and edgy about it, because the MCA had told everybody to turn it off at that point. So it created a bit of an issue which took some time to overcome. But looking back historically, we kind of get exactly why the MCA did it, and we understand and respect them for it, but it was frustrating at the time.
I suppose it's always better finding that out and getting all that done before you take it forward.
Well, we had done it all. This was just it, but it wasn't handed on properly to the. Well, not necessarily handed on properly, but they hadn't fully grasped the safety and everything. So there was nothing that we had to change on it. We just had to go back and repeat the process of demonstrating it to them again.
Yeah. Jason, your background includes the fleet air arm and diesel fuel systems across transport sectors. How different are marine engines in reality compared to road and off-road applications?
Yeah, people assume that marine engines are slightly completely different, but an engine's an engine, and whether it's road, off-road, or marine, it's just a marinized industrial engine. Diesel's diesel, and it burns at the same output, same compression ratios, same temperatures, and all we're doing is just allowing that burn to happen a little bit easier by using hydrogen as a catalyst. So, like for like, we've got a Wolf Land Rover, which was done for a trial for the MOD, and that's sort of, it's saving about 17% in fuel savings. We would expect to realistically see that sort of figure on boats if everything is driven like for like, as opposed to trying to push it against the hull speed. So realistically, every engine has the same principles. You measure the amount of fuel going in, you treat that amount of fuel with the amount of hydrogen, you reduce the carbon buildup, and obviously the fuel goes further. It's not exactly rocket science.
Jason, did you want to mention Brian Rowlings, what he saw, because he did the engine, the full service on the Crystal Sea?
Yes. So, well, you could say it, Kirstyn, if you want to go that way.
Okay, so Brian Rowling's Mechanical Engineering Services, and he carried out the full overhaul on the Crystal Sea recently, and he was talking exactly that about the similarities in engines. His previous experience of the EcoPro had been for systems that had been fitted to road vehicles, where he'd seen the engine life and cleanliness was the main reason for fitting it, but he saw the same results on the Crystal Sea's Cat engine there, because it's the same technology and the same principle, just being used in a different application. And I know Jason just mentioned briefly about the Wolf Land Rover as another example. We've got a customer who had a system fitted to a Wolf Land Rover, and he's just had to temporarily have it removed because he's having a new engine fitted. But he can't wait to get it back on because he's seeing around a 17% fuel saving and noticeably more pull going up hills. So end of when we see a fishing vessel achieving 8% saving, you can kind of be confident that you're going to see across all the other engines in the marine sector as well, because the physics that fundamentally underpin it don't change whatever the engine is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, total sense. Interesting as well.
That's good.
What fun you're having along the way.
Oh, it's all a challenge. But I think a lot of it is finding out where the pitfalls are and then fixing the problems as you go. What we do really well is if we see a problem or if we've heard of any issues which need resolving or a customer's not happy, we go there and we fix it, wherever it is in the UK. We'll be there at whatever time of day it requires, so that what we desperately try not to do is affect anyone's operating pattern. So if they land at midnight and they're going back out to sea at 8 o'clock in the morning, we'll be there between midnight and 8 o'clock to put any rectifications in place. So
that's excellent. That's really good. You state that every day without EcoPro is costing owners significant fuel waste. It's a bold statement, but how would you quantify that?
Yep, it is a bold statement, Jim. It's backed up by 3 years of monitored data from the Crystal Sea. So the engines typically burn without the EcoPro, are typically burning around 70% of their fuel efficiency. The rest is unused and becomes soot or carbon deposits or pollution, which is waste, and that's happening every hour for every engine that's running. On the Crystal Sea, the 8% fuel saving works out to approximately 144 litres a day, or 36,000 litres a year. That's £86,400 for Dave Stevens over 3 years, and that's real data from a working Newlyn trawler, not a lab estimate. But here's the part that really surprised us. The fuel saving is only one piece. Dave Stevens has carefully tracked every cost since the EcoPro was installed in December 22. The oil and routine maintenance saving came from £14,100. The Crystal Sea avoided two manufacturer recommended top-end overhauls, saving £30,000. And the major engine overhaul was deferred from the Cat engine recommendation of 28,000 to 36,000 hours. That's a 28% increase in service life. And with a full overhaul on an engine of that class costing around 100,000, that deferral alone saved them about 105,000. And those are figures that Dave Stevens has come back to us with. So the total life cycle value delivered over 3 years was more than 235,000 in total. Plus, on top of that, 294 tons of CO2 being saved from going into the atmosphere. So the secondary benefits are worth significantly more than the actual fuel saving he's seen, which is something that people aren't really focused on at this point, but is kind of gradually, as we get systems that have been out there for longer and people are actually monitoring their engine conditions, hopefully that's going to be something which really resonates with people going forward.
Very interesting. I think we could say from our previous recordings with David, skippers actually are seeing percentage fuel savings.
Yes, they are, but percentage fuel savings is great, and we get that's the thing they want to see, and I understand that from a money in their pocket point of view. And the nice thing is that they're effectively being paid to reduce their emissions and reduce their pollution. And I don't think there are any other systems out there that you can use that actually do some good for the environment, but actually save people money rather than costing them money. But because the additional benefits are the reduced maintenance and the longevity in the engine and the better working environment, as well as generally in the atmosphere, that there's so many additional benefits as well as financial. But we do appreciate that the money in the pocket every time they top up, particularly at the moment as everything's skyrocketing with fuel consumption, is really critical.
Yeah, as you're saying all this, I have to say the stakes are high. A really good friend of mine, I was talking to him, he just landed last week and filled up with fuel, 60,000 litres. So it's
I'm wincing when I fill the car up right now, never mind filling a boat up.
yeah, indeed. And there's many fuel-saving products that have come and gone in the industry. Why do you feel this is different?
From my point of view, I think that it's science. It does what it's meant to do. If you're burning the fuel properly, and it's reducing soot. It's got to make the fuel go further. The engine temperature comes down slightly because there's a more homogeneous burn inside the engine. So NOx are produced when an engine has hot spots where it starts off all of us in different areas of the burn where it first ignites. That's the hot spot, and then that's when NOx are produced. But with a complete homogeneous burn, those high temperatures are reduced probably by about between 5 and 10%. So by reducing temperatures, you're not producing NOxes. It seems like just a straightforward scientific equation that it does what it's meant to do. And it's like talking with anybody with these technologies. If it's like Mark with his propeller coating, if you've got that on there and he explains to you why it does it, well, it's science. That's why it does it. It's not pie in the sky. It's not some weird, wacky, wonderful spray that you're going to put inside your carburetor or something. But it's not, and and it's getting over to the people to believe that it is doing what it's meant to be doing from a science background.
Yeah, I get why people are skeptical. I kind of understand that completely, and I think I'm naturally skeptical about everything as well. And then ultimately, I mean, every industry sees lots of products coming along claiming fantastic results. But that's why we spent years going through RENA type approval and the MCA acceptance, because that way we've got credibility on the product as well. And I think that's really important that it stands up to that level of scrutiny. But what really sets us apart for the real world is things like the Crystal Sea, where she's been carefully monitored for 3 years, and our software allowing real-time evaluation and comparison with previous cost records. As I said, with more than 235,000 in total life cycle value delivered, which was published in the Fishing News recently in February this year. It's not a claim, it's a documented result which has been tracked by Dave Stevens himself. And as Jason said, I think it's also important about the umbrella approach. It's something that we came across particularly out in Australia where we were doing some work out there. So the Crystal Sea, as Jason said, it's not just running the eco approach, it's also running the Heffring reporting system and Mark Edwards' marine fowl prevention prop coating. So the government should be encouraging a combined approach to reducing emissions. There's lots of great technologies out there, and if you combine them, every 2, 4, 6% improvement from each one adds up to create a very substantial total. So the eco approach is not the only answer, but it's a proven and significant part of the picture, we believe, right now.
Yeah. It's, to me, I find it really encouraging. There's people, you mentioned Mark earlier, Jason. I think it's encouraging for the industry and many, life going forward, that there's people like yourself and Mark there, because you're using, you're switched on, your subject, and it's saving a lot of people, probably saving their future.
I think it's a hard. Sorry, I'm jumping in behalf of Jason now. I think it's a hard battle because the government and industry in general expects the the engine manufacturers to come up with the solutions, and we appreciate that they're all looking at the future, the fuel of the future, and where things are going technology wise. But that's not actually tackling the here and now. And I think, as you said, you've got Mark, you've got ourselves. There are numerous other products out there that can all make a significant difference, but and they're actually available today to use, rather than sort of sitting back and saying, well, we won't do anything while we wait for somebody bigger, and that's a problem, big sort of industries to come up with a solution, because there's some great things going on, but it's small companies like ourselves that are actually sort of working hard and actually evidencing and having to evidence, and then providing the support to actually demonstrate it in real world sort of use.
Yeah. How do you ensure, I think you've maybe mentioned this earlier, Jason, but how do you ensure performance is consistent across different engine size and working patterns for like a trawl-in versus a boat steaming, for example?
Yeah, I think this is where having the dynamic approach, where the Cowie measures how much fuel's going in, how hard the engine's working, the RPM of the engine load, and then establishing how much, or determining how much hydrogen the diesel requires to be treated. So it dynamically changes. So if you back off the throttle, or you're just trawling or you're steaming, it dynamically changes to cover the overall usage. So it's quite clever, and it takes a thinking away from it. You haven't got to try and adjust things on the fly. Everything's automatic.
Yeah, it's not a set and forget system. It's constantly adjusting in real time depending on what the engine is doing. And as we're monitoring every installation remotely from HQ as well. So if anything needs fine tuning, we can see it and adjust it in real time.
Uh-huh. I mean, fishing vessels work at sustained load, often towing maybe heavy gear. Does your system perform better under load or light duty cycles?
Well, under both cycles. But obviously the adjustments there, and it dynamically adjusts. But obviously, the heavier it's working, the more fuel it's being using. So that 8% saving when it's burning 140 liters an hour as opposed to burning 60 liters per hour, then that 8% is a bigger figure to be saving.
Okay, yeah, good answer. Have you had engineers on board challenge the science behind hydrogen electrolysis?
Oh, absolutely, all the time. Yes, it's about saying that too good to be true. It's how much it takes more energy to crack the water than it does than the fuel savings. Now, if we think about factory fishing vessel over in Canada with a 5,000 horsepower Wärtsilä engine would normally use 1,000 liters of fuel per hour. With our system on, it was down to 900 liters of fuel per hour, and for it to do that, it would use about 2.2 kilowatts of power in the electrolyzers to do that. So to save 100 liters of fuel, and you probably get about 10 kilowatts, or say 7 kilowatts per liter of fuel. So you're saving 700 kilowatts of fuel per hour in the fuel. The quantity that the fuel's used is in the energy in the fuel. So that it would be and we're only using 2.2 kilowatts to do that. So we're using a lot less power than the actual engine is saving, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. It definitely does. But there's just one thing I would like to come back at you, what you mentioned there. But if I could just say to you, keep the answer clean. You mentioned there, I'm just going to ask you, you mentioned about too good to be true. I was going to. I would like your answer. What would you say to a skipper who thinks this sounds too good to be true?
Well, I'd say I'd fit it on the boat next door, and you can watch how he makes his wallet tops up. But no, realistically, you can only get beat down so many times by people, and sometimes it's there's plenty more fish in the sea, or plenty more. Sorry,
Yeah.
Kirstyn have a different idea than me.
No. I'm completely agreeing with you. But I would say back that up. Ring Dave Stevens. Obviously, you've chatted with him as well on the Crystal Sea, or Kevin Favis, who was the owner of the Emma Jane, because she was the first fishing vessel that we had the Eco Pro installed on when we did all our trials for the MCA. Talk to people who've had this on their boats for years and ask them directly. Dave said it himself, fitting it's a no-brainer. So you get your money back within a year, and after that you're in profit. So to be honest, I get it, and take up has been slow initially. It's a novel technology. The MCA rightly took time to understand it, and that pause lasted for over 7 months. But by the time it had lifted, the early adopters had got used to their savings and the novelty had worn off. Their improved fuel consumption was just how the engine ran now. So they weren't picking up their phone to tell everyone all about it, which meant other owners were not hearing the results. But the numbers that are now there in black and white, when you look at the Crystal Seas article in the Fishing News and her 235,000 total life cycle value saving over the 3 years, that's not us making a claim. That's published, documented, real results from a working Yulin trawler. So all I'd do is back up what Jason was saying and go and speak to people that have actually got the system fitted. And I know Dave Stevens said he'll happily talk to anybody. So yeah, that would be my answer. But I like Jason's fit it on the boat next door.
I do like that. That is one way of getting. That is one way of getting an effective reaction. With over 30 installations across the UK fleet, what patterns are you seeing?
The patterns are pretty consistent, which is reassuring, because we're fundamentally improving the combustion process, and a diesel engine's a diesel engine regardless of what badge it's got on it. We're seeing similar improvements across all the engine types and sizes. Fuel savings averaging around 8%, with some vessels exceeding 20%. NOx reductions of approximately 60%. Particulate matter reduced, or black soot as black carbon, reduced by up to 85%, and CO2 comes down in proportion to the fuel saved. So, and carbon monoxide as well has been reduced. So, and that you can actually see because the black smoke from the exhaust is visibly less on every installation. What's really emerging is the big story and the secondary benefits, as I mentioned earlier. The Crystal Seas engine overhaul was deferred by 28% in time-wise, from the CAT recommended 28,000 to 36,000 hours. 2 manufacturer recommended top-end overhauls avoided entirely, and oil service intervals were extended from 500 to 600 operating hours. So there's an important point here about what the Eco Pro is doing. It's not just one improvement. By improving the whole combustion process, you get fuel savings, reduced NOx, reduced particulates, reduced carbon monoxide, lower CO2, less engine wear, cleaner air for the crew, less soot on decks and paintwork, and a more reliable engine, which is a safety benefit. So that's a comprehensive improvement from a single retrofit system. So I kind of feel that the patterns we're seeing are pretty good across the board for everybody. Do you want to add anything, Jason? Or you happy
I think
with that?
you've covered most of it. Well done. Yeah.
In one sentence, with one breath.
Like only a woman can do.
Quite passionate about it, Jim. Quite passionate about it. The frustrating thing is you get the conversation, and we've had it so many times. People, as Jason said earlier, people go, well, it's too good to be true, or, well, if it's that good, why hasn't someone done it before? And I get that everybody's looking for that sort of magic bullet, the final solution. But just because they're looking for that which is somewhere over the horizon right now, shouldn't mean that right now we're ignoring what we can do at this moment in time. I think it's really important to take all these brilliant technologies that are out there, and ours obviously being clearly fantastic and one of them, and really make a difference, because we should be treating what's out there right now. So yeah, I just get a bit passionate and frustrated when people go, well, it's so obvious, why hasn't someone done it before? It's because we're doing it now.
You're perfectly entitled and right to feel passionate, Kirstyn.
Thank you. The nice thing is that our passion is being backed up by independent evidence, which is now, and it takes those years of being at sea to actually start getting that evidence back. You can do bench testing, which is great, but that's only a snapshot of real world ideal conditions sitting in a lab somewhere. But to us, actually doing real world testing or evidencing at sea on systems and getting genuine feedback from vessel owners is more valuable than anything else.
You know, what I don't believe in the dreaded word luck, but I just don't. But I think it's good, fortunate, maybe as a word, or it's good that I don't know if you could have anybody better than David.
He's certainly an excellent spokesman and far better at it than we are. So that tends to be why we sort of sit in the back and just let people speak on our behalf. But maybe we need to start pushing it out a bit more, I suppose.
But he's not frightened to try something new and look at the dreaded word change. He's confident, and I think he's fantastic.
He is, and because he owns and operates a boat, obviously with Alec as well. But because he's hands-on the ground, he knows exactly what that vessel does, and he'd meticulously recorded all their fuel consumption data and all their engine servicing data for the time prior to having the EcoPro fitted. So he knew what his baseline figures were before it actually got turned on. But I mean, one of the things I don't know if he said it on your podcast, but he certainly said it to us, and I have quoted him in the past, is he delayed fitting the EcoPro because he was worried about invalidating his engine warranty because it was a new engine. And he said, retrospectively now, having looked at what it's done, he wished he hadn't delayed. But obviously, that's a customer's decision, because an engine warranty is valuable, in theory. So I can fully understand why he did that. So we would always advise people to think seriously before they invalidated a warranty. But I mean, there's no reason why it should invalidate a warranty, but I'm sure that it would be an argument with an engine manufacturer, which we don't want to get into.
If vessels can prove reduced emissions through systems like this, could that shift the balance of power in the negotiations around decarbonisation?
Yep, I believe it absolutely could. If a skipper can present monitored, verified data showing that their vessel is actually reducing emissions through practical engineering, then that's a really powerful hand to play when government comes knocking about regulation. I get a bit hazy on government targets and dates, but the UK Maritime Decarbonisation Strategy sets a target of 30% reduction by 2030. There's a call for evidence specifically looking at sub 400 gross ton vessels, which includes the fishing fleet, and a formal consultation is expected in 26. There's a lot of confusion about the UK emissions trading scheme. It's expanding to domestic maritime from July 26, but fishing vessels are currently exempt. And that was confirmed in the government's response in November 25. However, that exemption is to be reviewed in 28 alongside the 5,000 gross tonnage threshold. So fishing's not paying for carbon credits today, but the exemption has a review date, not a guarantee of performance. So the direction of travel is clear and the regulatory net is tightening across the board. Vessels that can already demonstrate that they're reducing emissions through proven technology are going to be in a much stronger position when that review comes around. The Crystal at Sea is a perfect example. EcoPro, Heffring reporting, marks propeller coating, monitored, measurable, verifiable. 294 tonnes of CO2 saved in 3 years. That's the kind of evidence that carries weight in a policy discussion. And the great thing about the EcoPro is that it's not just doing one thing. By improving the whole combustion process, we're reducing, here we go, I'm going to list it again, fuel consumption, NOx, particulate matter, CO2, carbon monoxide, all from a single system. So that's a comprehensive improvement, not just a tick in one box.
Yeah, You're firing them there like a...
I'm quite good at that list. And it's growing. It's growing, but as we evidence it. But yeah.
I was going to describe it saying it's coming out of you like a bullets out again.
It's an opportunity. Don't talk about it. Well, I know I do. When I meet people in, when we go to, we were up at the Catapult Summit last week. And when you start talking to people, you can see them sort of go from that questioning blank look on their faces. And then it dawns on them, and then they really get it, and then they understand why just by improving the combustion process you can improve all these other bits, and it's not like the existing systems that are out there, which are all just trying to clean up what the engine's doing, because we're improving it at the point of combustion. You're not creating it in the first place, so therefore you don't need to clean it up at the other end of the exhaust pipe. I'll shut up now. I'm off on my rant again. Sorry.
No rants. Is there a
I
risk
can't stick to a script. I've just got to talk about it then.
Is there a risk that improved efficiency simply raise expectation from regulators?
Fair question, fair concern. I think there's always a risk that demonstrating what's possible raises the bar for everyone. But the alternative is doing nothing and hoping that the regulators leave you alone. And I personally don't think that that's a great plan at all. Regulation's coming, as I said, and the UK ETS fishing exemption's up for review in 28. The IMO is progressing mandatory black carbon rules. New emission control areas in the Canadian Arctic and Norwegian Sea are coming into effect shortly, and there's a proposed North Atlantic ECA under discussion. Black carbon, which we know we can make a significant difference to, has a warming impact of more than 3,000 times that of CO2 over a 20-year period, and shipping emissions have doubled in the Arctic. The IMO has been discussing this since 2011, but mandatory regulations are now being developed. And we were face to face with the MCA the other day having a chat, and they said that black carbon is just becoming the critical thing that everybody's talking about. So I'd much rather that the fishing industry was at the table with real evidence of what's practical and economically achievable on a working vessel than be told what to do by people who've never set foot on a trawler deck. And the Crystal Seas data and Dave Stevens, gives us really good evidence for that.
Yeah. Do policy makers understand the operational profile of a fishing vessel?
I'm laughing. Sorry. I don't think so, or at least if they do, not well enough. And that's a general feeling, I think, of most fishermen when you speak to them out there. The government's own call for evidence acknowledges that fishing is going to need more time, describes the process as the start of a conversation with the sector. So I think that, in itself leads us to realise that there's definitely gaps that they're aware of in their understanding. A fishing vessel operates with a sustained heavy load in harsh conditions, far from any fueling infrastructure. So that's a fundamentally different profile from a ferry running a fixed route or a leisure boat in the marina. You can't apply the same decarbonisation template across everything as a broad brush. So that's why it's really practical for retrofit solutions to matter so much. So the EcoPro works with the engine that the fisherman's already got and can be fitted today. So there's no new infrastructure needed other than the installation of the EcoPro. No new fuel supply chain, no new vessel. It's a real improvement that can happen now. And the data from vessels like the Crystal Seas, it's exactly the kind of evidence the policymakers need to see when they're making decisions about what's realistic for this sector. But I think they've actually got to honestly look and create a solution or offer a solution that is effective for the fishing industry as a whole and not just the whole marine sector.
For hearing so much from Kirstyn with your questions, I've actually got one for her now, so maybe you'll be stepping in.
Yeah, you jump in, Jason.
From my experience so far, Jason, I would just give you one word of advice. If you're tapping the hammer, make sure you don't hit Kirstyn's thumb.
I'm feeling ganged up against here.
I'll buy you a pint, Jim.
Oh, that'll be good. Kirstyn, you've worked to
Just you.
secure funding pathways through FAS and Marine Fund Scotland. Without grant support, is this still viable for small, like family boats?
Yes, it's really, really good, particularly for small family boats. FAS has historically covered up to 80% of the cost, depending on the vessel size and turnover. So, for example, the Crystal Seas system cost them 22,000, but the business only had to pay 11,000 of that because it was matched by FAS funding. And that investment, as I said, has delivered over 235,000 of life cycle savings over 3 years. So that's a really good return on their investment. But even without grant support, Dave Stevens said himself, you get your money back within a year, and after that you're in profit. The fuel savings and reduced maintenance and the extended engine life, all those savings are ongoing afterwards as well. So looking ahead, the new Fishing and Coastal Growth Fund is expected to open its first round of applications soon. And we're teaming, and FAS, of course, is due to open very shortly. And we're teaming up again with Nathan de Rosero of Teagan Moor Fisheries to support vessel owners with their applications again. Marine Fund Scotland opened last week, and we've recently had confirmation that the Scottish fishing boats should be able to apply through the grant to purchase EcoPro. But the pot is limited and the demand is expected to be very high, and they've said that vessel owners should get their grant applications in quickly if they want to be considered. So we can turn the quota around for submission pretty quickly. Here's my plug. So we're just trying to encourage Scottish owners to get in touch as soon as possible. So that as a grant window for Scotland is closing in mid-May, and it looks like they're likely to be overwhelmed with applications again. So to be considered, they really need to be acting now. Cost of the system depends on the engine size, because that determines how many electrolyzer cells are actually needed. But we're happy to run the numbers for any vessel. But if, again, going back to Crystal Sea, if you look at with or without the grant support, fitting an EcoPro should get your return on your investment within months, and then hopefully you're in profit, which right now would be really helpful for everybody out there, I think. So yes, my answer is I think that it's really viable for everybody, but you kind of need to look at the whole approach, and maybe not just the fuel saving, because for a lot of the smaller boats that perhaps aren't doing the 24/7 operations of some of the larger trawlers and what have you, then it may take a bit longer to get a payback, but we do aim to try and support them through that process until they get a payback on their investment.
And how difficult is the grant process in reality, like paperwork versus practical outcome?
I hate grant applications, and I think that probably is the same for everybody, probably, unless they're lucky enough to have big companies that handle grant processes themselves. It's certainly not a 5-minute job, and I know that fishermen are really busy people with better things to do than filling in forms, so kind of we understand why it's so tricky. So we try and help them through the process as much as we can. We know the applications and we know what the assessors are looking for. As I said, I've been trying to speak to Marine Fund Scotland. I sent them an email last week with a long explanation of why I felt that the EcoPro ticked all the boxes for Marine Fund Scotland. And we didn't hear anything directly back from them, but we've heard it back via a third party that they've said, yes, EcoPro certainly ticks all the boxes and should be eligible. So I can understand the frustration if people are trying to contact to find out whether or not it's suitable. But going back to, obviously, we provide all the technical documentation to help them through it. And then with the support of Nathan, and I can't remember the name of the chap in Scotland, Adie's been in touch with him, but I know that there's a contact in Scotland as well to help with the Scottish ones. We can kind of help them through that whole FAS application process. And certainly with FAS, I know Adie's quite quick to mention that. We're lucky enough because there isn't another technology out there that does exactly what we do. The FAS application doesn't require 3 quotes before it'll approve the installation of the EcoPro, so it makes it a fairly straightforward and fairly quick process when fishermen are actually applying for it. But ultimately, the practical outcome of it all makes it all worthwhile. You end up with a system on your vessel that saves fuel and reduces emissions, protects the engine, and a significant portion of the cost hopefully is being covered by the grant. So hopefully it makes all that paperwork worth doing in the end.
Well, don't hold your breath if you're waiting for Marine Scotland to bond.
I've learnt that. But the important thing is we did hear that they said it should be eligible, and that is brilliant, because I know there were a couple of people that applied last year and they were turned down. But from what Marine Funds, we were concerned it was because of the EcoPro, but from what Marine Fund Scotland have implied, it was just that they were so oversubscribed that they had to pick and choose, so they just chose in different windows. So that's why I'm saying people in Scotland, there's a window open right now. Really, they need to, if they can get us their information, we can get that quote back to them. Marine Fund Scotland have now said it can go in the pot and go in the mix and will be addressed. So they stand a really good chance of getting some money towards it now, but only between now and the 15th of May. And I would suggest that window is going to get used up quite quickly, probably.
Yeah, are we moving quickly enough in making transitional technologies accessible, or are fishermen being left in limbo waiting for future fuels?
I think they're very much left in limbo, and I think that's a real problem. I don't think they really know, because I don't think the government really knows which way it's going yet. So I think that then causes some wobble in the industry. Full electrification for a working fishing vessel is going to be years away, unless you're talking about smaller day boats like Hans's boat. And I fully get. I was on a presentation with him last week, and it's an excellent video, and we're all for saying, if there's an alternative green solution, we're not saying fit an EcoPro instead, because obviously electrification works very much for some of the inshore boats, and that's excellent. But for working fishing vessels, I think it's still years away, possibly decades, or dare I say, 20 plus years away. And certainly if you speak to fishermen themselves and some of the much bigger boats, with speaking to some of the cargo boats and what have you, they can't see shipping going away from diesel for a very long time. So hydrogen propulsion, ammonia, they're still in really early development for these sorts of marine applications, and the infrastructure's not there either for it yet. So the costs are going to be, certainly for now, for early adoption, would be prohibitive. But meanwhile, right now, fishermen have got bills that have got to be paid now, and fuel to buy right now, and fuel is going through the roof. And emissions, the regulators are increasingly interested in watching right now as well. So the EcoPro is something that skippers can fit today on an engine that they already have and start seeing the results immediately. There's no new infrastructure, no new fuel, no new vessel. I know I keep harking back to Dave Stevens, but when you look at him, and he got his money back within a year, and now the Crystal Sea's delivered 235,000 in value over 3 years. So I kind of think that they are in limbo, but I'd like the government to look at more of an umbrella approach to everything. Combine the EcoPro with Mark's propeller coating and the Heffring reporting system and better operational practices. Every percentage adds up. If the government is serious about decarbonisation in the fishing fleet, it should be encouraging this combined practical approach rather than asking fishermen to wait for a future fuel that doesn't exist yet.
Yeah, good answer. Beyond fuel savings, what are you seeing in terms of reduced carbon buildup or engine wear?
Basically, it's amazing, really, because you're talking with Brian and the chaps from Finnings when they came down to the Crystal Sea. They were looking at it, and there was no bore wear in the pistons. You could still see the honing marks from inside the piston liners. There's no wear and no glazing on bearings, main bearings. Generally, internal, the turbo stays clean, the intercoolers stay clean, any EGR systems are staying clean. The biggest one for us was on a tractor, and this is where I think it's got something which is really important for the marine industry, and it's the product that should never ever be fitted to a boat. So if you're going to fit AdBlue and an SCR on a boat that is not running optimally all the time because it's changing its speed, it's great if it's running flat out and it's allowing the system to work properly. But as soon as you have crystallization building up inside the exhaust, it's the actual build-up is ammonium nitrate, which is the same thing that blew up in the harbour in Beirut. So I think, for me, it's a product that should never ever be on a boat. and we're avoiding all that risk, really. So we're reducing carbon, reducing wear, reducing the need for any riskier solutions, reducing the risk of having AdBlue on a boat, the extra tanks required. The benefits go on to achieve the same thing. Plus, we save them the 8% in fuel instead of costing them the 8% extra to run a product.
And the maintenance costs, Jason? Sorry, go back to that. I mean, with, as you said, on the Crystal Sea, her savings from avoiding 2 top-end overhauls and obviously what was it, the top hold, yeah, that was 149,100 overall, I think it was, over the 3 years. So that's, and then she's saving on oil as well. So the top end overhauls were £15,000 each, say they were avoided entirely. And obviously less oil changes as well, so that's a significant saving in time and money as well.
Completely, yeah. Can you confidently say this extends engine life, and if so, by how much?
From my point of view, I would confidently say it prolongs the life indefinitely, providing the engine oil's changed. Because if you've not got the soot acting as a grinding paste in the oil, then you've got the engine should be able to carry on because the oil is doing the lubrication job and it's not wearing. So if it's not wearing, you haven't got to replace it. So I think for insurance point of view and general other products around the engine, so like valve springs where they're not, where they will need replacing because they can only operate so many times. But for the actual engine itself, it can go on the bearings and obviously the piston walls and the piston rings. You know, Jim. It's amazing, honestly.
I'm going to jump in briefly. Sorry, Jim. But to me, I think one of the things that government is kind of trying to say is they want to replace what engines we're using now with something better. And again, fully get that if you've got an old clunky engine. But if you can take an existing diesel engine and make it cleaner and greener now, surely that's got to be greener than saying, well, let's scrap a perfectly good engine, throw it away and put something new in there. Because that's, when you look at the carbon footprint for a new engine, and the starting point itself isn't great. If you've got an existing engine, you've already got that carbon footprint accounted for. So let's do something good with what we've already got to see it, and by all means extend it if its life can be extended, if that makes it cleaner, as long as it is cleaner. That's got to be better for the environment ultimately than just saying let's just scrap it and go for an alternative engine.
Yeah, that's a bit unusual, Jason, for Kirstyn to say, I'll jump in here.
But she talks total sense, Jim.
Good.
And that's a husband.
Well, I would say the same thing, Jason, with my wife, but I would say, well, I'm not brave enough to argue.
I was going to say, I did an article the other day, actually, Jim, about the difficulty for women talking in transport industry and the marine industry, and how it's still a very male-dominated world, and how difficult it is for women actually to be taken seriously and listened to. Because you walk into, and I still find it, we'll walk into meetings and people will I'm only 5 foot, so I appreciate it. People will automatically talk over my head, and they're taught man to man, and it's really hard sometimes to get that conversation going where you can actually be listened to as a woman. But I have to say, Jason and my team are excellent at saying no, listen to Kirstyn, so I'm very grateful for that. But it is a hard industry sometimes for women to speak in. So sorry, I'm going off on another tangent there, but thank you for the opportunity.
I'm with you 100% there, Kirstyn, because
it is really difficult, and I think that it's really hard for industry to really realise that women are seeing that. Sometimes it can be self-perceived. I appreciate that, and men aren't aware that it's happening. But yeah, it's really important to sometimes get that point across. And I think as well, certainly, and I'm going off a bit now, off the angle here. But when we have a meeting with people, or we're at a show or something, and we're talking to people, men generally you'll have the conversation with them, and they're all about the fuel savings when they're talking about the EcoPro. And I 100% get that. It is about the fuel savings. But you have that same conversation with a woman, and they come at it from a different angle. It's about the environment, and it's about reducing the emissions. And yes, fuel savings are important, but women seem to have a different look on the same look at the same problem. Sometimes it's really good to have both sets of people at the table, I think, so to cover every angle.
Yeah, I take it you've had very positive feedback from marine engineers after long-term installations.
No, absolutely. And so we've had a report from Revolution Engineering on the Emma Jane, and she avoided 2 top end overhauls, and then they did and purely on inspections with a boroscope looking inside the engine. There's no build-up. They every time they decided to push back the main strip down of the engine, and the only problem is that they rebuilt the engine last year, I think, and that was just purely down to there was salt water ingress into the fuel. So that was the rebuild obviously had to be done then, but it's just shows that it's like everything. If you're in a good relationship and it goes well, along swimmingly, and there's no grind in there, then obviously it's easier, isn't it?
Yeah, I think when you look at the Crystal Sea and the Emma Jane, obviously two different vessels, two different engineers, both coming to the same conclusions, that the engine was cleaner than expected for the hours they'd run. So same results.
Yeah, I've heard that. Myself. Is it realistic how far away hydrogen and ammonia or full electrification from heavy fishing vessels?
It's not possible at the moment, is it? No, if you think about the most dense way to store fuel is as diesel. If ammonia is probably as good, or is probably as close as you can get to the set, then that's probably only 60-70% of the power of diesel out of the same quantity. So if you want to go to sea for 3 days, yes, it's probably doable. If you want to go to sea and do your job effectively for the weeks that you normally do, you want to go up into off Norway, you want to go up into the North Sea, and you haven't got a top this, Jim, there's just not the infrastructure, there's not the technology to do anything other than diesel at the moment.
I don't think you can wait for the next 15 years to ask a fisherman to sort its problems out either. So I think they kind of need to be given an opportunity right now.
Well, who's to say it's going to be fixed in 15 years? And if you don't do it now, you don't do it ever. And from the health point of view, Jim, I think, I think what is going to happen, I think there are going to be fisher crew that don't smoke, that have then they have cancer or lung issues, and they can prove it's down to the diesel on the boat. Then if the boat owner hasn't taken every precaution, and this is a precaution by fitting the EcoPro, then obviously they're liable for the crew's health.
Is incremental efficiency improving the diesel engines we already have the only practical bridge solution?
Yeah. What else have we got? We could do hybrids. We could get more out of diesel electric. But then if you have diesel electric, then treat the diesel side of it with an EcoPro. So then you'd get maybe a okay. So they did a trial with a hybrid engine, and it was actually 10% less efficient than just the diesel engine on its own. But because it was green and hybrid, it was a good thing. So Jim, I personally, from my point of view, until somebody comes up with a golden bullet, I think you're stuck with us.
I think that the umbrella approach is the route to go for all of this, because lots of little incremental steps has got to be a good solution rather than waiting for one perfect solution at the other end. So that would be my thoughts on it. Don't just do one thing, do a whole load of things.
No, I get that. And from what you said there, Jason, I'm right with it, because let's face it, there's no such a thing as a gold or silver bullet. 5 years from now, where does Ecomotus sit? Niche technology or mainstream fitments?
I'd like to think mainstream very much. That's the goal that we have, and that's where we're hopefully heading. The technology works. The Crystal Sea's proven the business case beyond any reasonable doubt. 235,000 in life cycle value, 294 tonnes of CO2 saved. And obviously that was published in the Fishing News for everyone to see. The government hopefully is looking at long-term investment in the sector with the Fishing and Coastal Growth Fund, and regulatory environment's definitely only moving in one direction. So we're starting to see more of an international interest as well growing. We're about to start a trial over in France. So the EcoPro is definitely not limited to UK only fishing vessels, or not even just fishing vessels. Obviously, as we've mentioned, cargo as well that we're in conversations with at the moment. But any diesel anywhere in the world can basically be retrofitted and can benefit from having the EcoPro on. So I reckon 5 years from now, I'd like to think that it would be a standard consideration for any vessel operator looking at their emissions and their fuel bills. Just look at what Dave Stevens said about fitting it being a no-brainer. So I'd like to think that every skipper in the UK would be thinking the same and feeling the same way about it. So yes, mainstream, Jim, mainstream.
Excellent. Exciting times ahead.
I hope so. Sometimes, as you said earlier before we started talking, sometimes the rougher the start, the better the ending. So let's hope so.
When you said that about what you said earlier, I thought, oh no, what did I say earlier?
No, I think we're going to prove that process. It's been a slog, and I think there are days when you wake up just thinking, is it worth it? Because we could walk away and not do, and certainly we would have a lot less hassle. We don't need to be doing this. We're doing this because we passionately believe it's something that the industry needs and the world needs. So that's what gets us going and keeps us motivated and keeps us slogging along through every conversation with surely it's too good to be true, because we know it does it. We know it's physically there and represented, and we know if it's represented by one vessel, it can be achieved by all vessels, because the whole process of improving the fuel combustion is generic to every engine. So if one vessel owner is seeing 8%, or as we've got other vessel owners that have recorded they're seeing in excess of 20%, in theory, if that ability is there to see it once, you can replicate that and see it across everything. There's no reason to believe it shouldn't do that. It's just about getting the right amount of hydrogen dosed to the same amount of fuel and getting that data. Once you've got that data, then it should all fall into place very easily. So, but we're learning all the pitfalls as we go along about how difficult it is to get that information.
Yeah, but every day is a school day. We're all hopefully always learning. But I
Yep.
would say myself, listening to you, I would say your passion tells me you believe in what you're doing and you know it works. So that's what's going to sell it.
We've always stood by what we've said and done, and that's why it's been, to a degree, it's been a slow burner for that reason as well, because we've always wanted to go through and look at what hasn't quite been right and rectify that. And we've gone back to all the vessels that had installs in the early days and upgraded them as well, so that they've all got the latest technology, because we sort of believe passionately in getting them to see the benefits. But yes, it can certainly be a feel like you're bashing your head against the wall sometimes. But the more we get people like Dave Stevens on side prepared to actually be spokesman for it, the more I think it's really good, because I kind of feel that it's one of those good news stories which some areas of industry don't really want to see get traction, because ultimately the government makes a reasonable amount from tax on fuel and what have you. So actually saying we're saving fuel isn't necessarily a win for every angle, but really, as the government and the country and the world as a whole, everyone should be doing their bit to reduce their emissions and reduce their pollution. And if it costs somebody a little bit to do it, then I think that should still be something we should all consider doing.
Where can our listeners follow you online? Have you a social media presence?
We have, but I'm not very good at it. I'll admit that, probably because we rely too much on other people talking for us. But we have our website, which is ecomotus.com. We're sort of active on LinkedIn under Ecomotus EcoPro. I sort of post periodically, and hopefully we're going to have some more exciting news coming shortly, which will be posted up on there soon as well. We've got a number, an 0800 number that they can contact us on if they want to speak to us direct, and we're always happy to do that. Shall I share a number? Is that all right to share it now? Or, well, I will. 0800 566 8080. But honestly, best thing any skipper can do is just pick up the phone or drop us an email. We're not a big corporate company. We're a very small team, and we love talking to people about this. Hopefully that's come across today. And hopefully I won't get on my what do you call it, soapbox and start chattering too much. There's no hard sell. We're not interested in hard selling anybody, and we'll run the numbers for any vessel to show what the potential savings will look like. Because I mentioned earlier, we're working with Nathan de Rosero to help with applications for FAS, and likewise, there's a Scottish colleague up there, and we'll do our best. We're also speaking to another company now who potentially could help to bridge that gap in the grant funding, because I know that's a key issue for fishermen, where they have to pay for a system up front, and then they've got to wait for the government to sort of through the grant to pay for it after it's been installed. So there's a conversation we're having to try and line up a company that they can possibly speak to, can help bridge the gap for them. So we're just trying to find ways of making everything easier. And we'll do our best to help everybody with any paperwork that's involved too. But ultimately, if any of your listeners want to speak to the skippers who've already had the system, we're always happy to connect them, because our best salespeople are the fishermen who are running with it already.
Yeah, that's very evident. Yeah, totally with you. Well, I would just like to thank and conclude, but I want to conclude with a quote, which I think is appropriate from my dear old late mother. I feel it's timely and very appropriate by the way the world is just now, and with today's conversation. Necessity is the mother of invention.
Absolutely is. Thank you, Jim. It's been really brilliant to talk to you, and hopefully we've got across our passion about the EcoPro, and hopefully we've cleared up some of the maybe confusion and fuzzy areas people may have about not having heard much about what's going on with us. We're still there. We're still working really hard. We're doing lots of development in the background as well for new angles and new tech, which hopefully for vessels that have already got the EcoPro fitted, there's lots of potential benefits just around the corner, significant benefits for them, which we can't really talk about right now.
Okay, thank you very much both. And I would just like to thank you, Jason, and I would just like to thank our listeners, and please subscribe or share it with your friends. Thank you.